Hey there, this is the final video for Moonmirth House, part 3. Starting out, I'm going to make some barrels, 6 in all. I need 2 with rope and 4 with steel bands. I'm using insulation foam to sculpt them. I found it easier, quicker, and the detail was far better. It looked a lot more like wood. I marked an even circle on the top and bottom of each one and used that as my guide so I could cut away each corner so I can get a nice even size and shape around each one of them. You can see the shape coming together. It made it so much easier when I needed to sand it. And this is the basic barrel shape, and that's after sanding. You can see how much better it looks. And this is before. I've cut the top and the bottom off each one just to make it a little more stout. I used a pencil just to score the shape in the top and also to do all the boards. The pencil, you have to do very, very softly on this foam, otherwise it just veers off in any direction it wants to. So very lightly score each one, and then you can just press a bit harder after you've done each correctly the first go. Used a toothpick just to put the fine grain into the appearance of wood. It works really, really well. Quick and easy. Far better than using cardboard to try and do this. And now it's ready to paint. It has a really great effect once you've painted it, and it's so much quicker and easier to make a lot of these out of the foam. It's really good. Gave it a coat of this very cheap brown acrylic paint. You've got to be careful with the cheap stuff because it's got a lot of plastic in it and it'll give it a sheen that you won't want on the foam. To make the aging colour, I just use white, blue, brown, black and a bit of yellow ochre. Just never use black and white to make greys because it'll look wrong. It looks like I'm putting a lot more on this than I am, but the foam will soak up the colour and it'll look a lot lighter later on. So more than one coat is needed on this. It's great the way it picks up the detail when you just lightly feather it across. You can already see the effect that it's going to have, and it looks a lot like wood, or a lot like aged wood. It works better than the cardboard. The way the tiny indentations in the foam will just allow you to pick up the light when you apply the dry paint. The bands I just made out of a good bit of paper, thin strips, and then I just stained them with the ink and then a very rough coat of acrylic silver. You want it to be rough so it looks like there's some rust coming through from underneath. Gluing them on can be a bit fiddly, but they come out really well. Really nice, easy barrels. Time to start working on the terrain. I've put some brown ink all over this terrain as well on top of the soil. It kind of just brings out dark patches in it and makes it look more natural. And onto that, I put a bit of Mod Podge because I'm going to apply some flocking that I made myself out of sawdust. I'm going to leave a link for the different things that I've made in this that are in one of my older videos, and you can check them out if you want to see how to make them, things like the flocking. Most of this grass flocking that I'm putting down is going to be covered later in static grass, but this underlayer of this flocking is just beautiful because when you have the static grass on top, it kind of looks like little clumps and layers of things like clover and leaves and things like that, and it gives a depth as well and a different colour, which helps it look far more natural in the final result. I've just sort of randomly applied it where I thought I'd need it. And this is the static grass on top, which is so realistic and beautiful. It's one of the few things that I don't make by hand that I use, and there's nothing like it that you could use. It's just so good. The applicator, I mean, I tend to electrocute myself with this thing, so I didn't film myself using it. But yeah, you use this to earth it and not your fingers. You just pop a nail down and you earth it with the little clip and then apply it. It's beautiful. Little tiny table just made out of balsa wood, 2 different thicknesses, one for the top and the other for the legs. I just created a little template for the legs from a little piece of cardboard, and it was easy to cut it out and then just trace each one down so I could make them all as similar as possible. They're not perfect, but it's close enough. Nobody will notice. And as always, if it's made of wood, I'll give it a stain with some brown ink. And this is it finished. It came out quite good. Of course, I scored some grain in the wood with a toothpick, and the paint was a little fiddly, but it, you know, it's rough, but it's nice. I like it. These crates, I did the same sort of treatment as I did with the barrels out of the foam. Just scored into them with a pencil to make the pattern, and then I used a toothpick to score the grain into it to give it a realistic effect. You can see how shiny this is from me using that cheap paint. I had to sand it back and then break that cheap paint down with something a little better to get that shine off it. But it came out not too bad. Even after this, I did it again with a toothpick and a little bit of sandpaper to make it a little more realistic and look more like wood. The paint I used are just these earthy colours, just to do the lighter bits around the edges. And as always, I use pencils to do some definition and make it a little dirtier or a little lighter, add detail. Pencils are brilliant. I did fiddle around with these quite a bit more and tweak them so they looked far more realistic than they do right now. But they came out quite good in the end. I made some ferns and other unidentified plants from some paper and wire. These are nice and basic to make as well, and reasonably realistic. The fern leaves came out quite nice. You can see them sort of feathered up the side the way I've cut them with a knife and scissors, and the wire makes them great. I started out doing these with some paper. I painted both sides, and you can see how roughly I've done it with the yellow and the green. I want all these lines going through it, so that can do the hard work of detail for me instead of me trying to create detail in the leaves later. And I cut a strip and a little template for the leaves, just so there's some uniform size and make them reasonably even. And then cream pencil, line straight up the centre of each strip that I made, and then just the little veins that come off the side. And you can see running through all the brush strokes. That just gives it a nice natural look about it. The frond one with the black strip down the centre and the white on either side of the black. I just cut them out with scissors and with a knife. Just give them a nice long shape. You attach them to your bit of wire. The wire is great because you can move them around later on and arrange them however you like them. Very easy, very effective little leaves. Now it's time to start assembling the entire project. Moonmirth House. There it is. The stairs. And the little Khajiit wagon that I made in the last video. Oh, they are a beautiful couple. Look at that. Gorgeous. the crates that I made. You can see they're far more natural looking now. That one's got some loose planks on top that I made out of popsicle sticks. And the barrels. These little sacks I made just out of a little bit of foam inside some paper that I very lightly washed with some yellow ochre and brown ink, and then used pencil on top once I glued them together. They're pretty simple. Inserting these leaves was a bit fiddly. It was hard to push through the soil and the paint and the glue, but I got there in the end. They came out quite nice. Make sure you use a water-based glue for this, because if you're coming in contact with the foam, it's going to dissolve it. You'll have a great big crater underneath where you tried to glue it in if you don't use water-based glues. These go in beautifully. You can just move them around for quite a while as the glue dries and bend the wire even once it's dry the next day. And just keep arranging them until you have them just the way you want them. Some little tufts of flowers and sort of grassy flowers that I made out of paintbrush bristles, and I just lightly dipped them into some creamy coloured paint. Made them look like little flower buds on the top. Used a nail to make quite a good sized hole to insert it into. They come out lovely. They look natural, and they fill a lot of empty space on a diorama. They don't sort of take too much away. They're really brilliant little plants to make. Little plate that I made from polymer clay and painted it silver, and then a little tiny loaf of bread. It's kind of cute. Little polymer clay vase that I made, and a little bowl of herbs. We'll call them herbs. And the final piece that I made is a little torch, which came out really good. And that's it. Moonmirth House complete. I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, I'll see you next time.